Good morning. Once again, welcome everyone here. It is a beautiful day outside. The sun is shining, lighting up God's work and God's creation. And even though it is pretty warm outside, it reminds us of the power that God has in His creations. And as always, I hope that everyone's had a good week. To our regular members, I hope that everything's going well for you. And it's great to be with brothers and sisters in Christ this morning as I am with you. Before we get started, something I didn't quite realize until last week is that several months back, our church Facebook page got lost. That's how we were doing live streams, and that's what I started doing a little bit after I got here about 4 or 5 years ago. And my account got hacked, and I never regained access to it, and it's been gone for a while. And basically, a hacker got a hold of it trying to scam people out of money. And because our Facebook page, our church page was connected to my profile, lost access to that as well. And so over the last few months, I've been trying to figure out ways to do live streams. And I've actually been recording my lessons on my YouTube page until I found out a better solution. And I haven't quite done that yet. But it kind of occurred to me last week that I've got a lot of lessons that I haven't really explained how to access those. So if you want to go back and look at our previous lessons, I do have everything that I've got on my YouTube page. If you want to access that, then here are the instructions to access my page. I created this page many years ago, back when I was in college. And so the handle name here is actually Sinistred 19, but it'll pull up as Britt Thompson. And if you pull up a little short video of Natalie, just overlook that one. I found out this morning that apparently she had recorded a little short video about 3 weeks ago, and I'll go through and I'll adjust that. But it has all of our all the lessons I've done over the last 3 or 4 months should be on there. So if you want to access those, or if you want to share those with somebody to take a look at our lessons, maybe a visitor, then feel free to do that. I've had that done for a while, but I hesitated to really make it public because it's my personal page. But there are lessons on there from school and things like that as well. But our church lessons are on there if you want to access those. And I'll get this information put in the bulletin as soon as I can as well. This time of year, a lot of people, a lot of families are heading down to the beach. And maybe that's been someone here. Maybe you've got a trip upcoming back in late April, early May. Heather went to the kids down to the Gulf Coast as I was working for our state track meet. I did get them a room to where they could enjoy a couple of days down at the beach. But what we see here is a picture of what would look like down at Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, Panama City, of that bright, beautiful white sand. And if you look a little closer at it, then that's pretty much what it looks like, especially when it's on a white screen. It looks very clean for the most part. But, there are different kinds of sand across the world. If you go to another place around the country, then the sand is going to be a little darker than like what you see here. About 8 years ago, Heather and I, for our 1 year anniversary, went to the East Coast. We went to Savannah, Georgia, and then up to Charleston, South Carolina. And it kind of, within that 4-hour trip between the two cities, went through several different island heads. And for the first time, saw the Atlantic Ocean from the actual East Coast. And the first thing we noticed was that the sand was very different than what we have on the Gulf of Mexico, and that it was darker. It was almost like a dirtier sand. But regardless, it is still sand. This looks like what you would buy if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot to buy a bag of sand. That's what it would look like. If you go to other places across the world, then you would see something like this right here. And I'm not exactly sure what island this is, but I know that if you go to places over in Eastern Asia like Japan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and I think even Hawaii has some of this as well, then you would see it much darker, almost like black rocks, but that's actually sand. So the point here is that you've got a lot of different types of sand and a lot of different things. Sometimes you even have things like actual rocks. All serve the same purpose. And even though it looks different to the naked eye, if we put these under a microscope, then what you're going to see is something very different than what our own regular eyes see. I took a picture, I researched a picture of what grains of sand look like under a microscope. And that's what it looks like. That tan or white sand actually looks like that right there. And those look like little stones or little pebbles. as does this right here, and this right here. But those are actually grains of sand. To our eyes, it looks like something very different, but in all reality, that's what sand is. And the point that we're getting to here is that we're looking at the compare and contrast of what we see versus what God sees. Again, our eyes see the regular sand that we can go to our local home improvement store to buy, maybe to fill in holes in the yard, or maybe down at the beach. But what God sees is what's really there. See, the sand is God's creation. Just as I mentioned a minute ago, God's creation is lining up out here what He created many, many years ago, and that includes the sand. That's what God sees. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7 says, "For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." And that's the focus of our lesson this morning. Looking at what God sees, looking through the eyes of God. And if this looks familiar, I actually did this lesson about 5 years ago when I first got here. But there was a conversation I had last night that really kind of reminded me of this and felt the need to kind of go back and change a few things here and kind of use this basis for my lesson this morning. We're going to look at things through the eyes of God. And we're going to compare and contrast what man sees and what we think that we know versus what God sees and what God knows. And we're going to take a deep look into several different aspects here. And so the first thing we're going to look at here is looking at the power of God. Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 22 says, "Do you not fear me, declares the Lord? Do you not tremble in my presence? For I have placed the sand as a boundary for the sea, an eternal decree, so it cannot cross over. Though the waves toss, they cannot prevail. Though they roar, they cannot cross over." You see, again, God has created everything for a specific purpose. And those beachheads, that sand, that was created by God for a specific reason. You can sit here and say, well, there are hurricanes and things like that. Well, the water gets beyond that, it floods areas. We've seen that very thing this past weekend in Texas. Very tragic situation where dozens of people have died because floodwaters got so high so quickly to where the barriers could hold it. But eventually, that water goes back down, and the sand serves its purpose. We see the power of God here in regards to what we see around us. And even though we can't really comprehend it, again, God reminds me that of Jeremiah 5:22. And that if you stand on the beach and you see those waves roll in, sometimes it gets a little higher, sometimes a little lower. But again, under normal circumstances, it's going to stay right in its place. And that's the way that God intended for it to be. As we see this scene as maybe a scene of beauty or maybe a scene of vacation, whatever it is, God has created this for a purpose. You see, God sees beauty within us just as He sees the beauty in His creation. Psalm chapter 8, verse 3 says, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you take thought of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than God, and you crowned him with glory and majesty." You see, just as God sees His creation differently than how we see it, God sees us differently than how we see ourselves. God sees us differently than how we see each other. And that, again, is the power and the beauty of God. I want to put up a couple of pictures on the board at this point in time. How do we see other people? If you were to see this man sitting on a park bench here in Athens, what would you think of him? I have no idea where he's from, but I can see that his jeans are torn. I can see that he's wearing, his clothes are not, I would say, matching in that he's wearing just what he has. He has a bottle of water here. I see snow on the ground, so it's pretty cold outside. He has a pretty thin jacket. I would guess that man is probably falling on hard times, maybe even homeless. Same in this scene right here. I don't even know if that's a man or a woman. But again, that's someone who appears to be homeless, who's sleeping on the side of the street. Again, days off the coat, probably the winter time. If you're to pass somebody like this on the street, what would you think? What would I think? Would I help them? Would I show pity on them, or would I just walk on by? How do I see that person? And then how does God see them? I want to show you a couple of different pictures here that are the exact opposite. If you were to meet this man, if this man were to walk into the building right now, how would you view this guy? He's wearing a nice suit, probably one much more expensive than the one I'm wearing. His picture is outside either a fancy home or building, probably very successful, probably somebody to look up to in regards to societal terms. But what does God see inside? I'm going to throw this one up as well. Over this summer, Heather and I got into reading and studying a little bit of the Kennedys. John Kennedy is one of my favorite presidents because of some of the things that he did as president in regards to his policies. And whenever we cover the Kennedys in my classroom, I always talk about their two different sides to presidents, in that you got the policy side in regards to commander-in-chief of the country and how they run the country versus their personal lives. John Kennedy is one of my favorite in regards to his policies, in regards to things like the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War, civil rights. I think he did a fantastic job. John Kennedy, the man, the husband, not so much. And there are a lot of theories out there. There are a lot of rumors as to what he did or did not do. And I think that some of those still today are mysteries, unless you have certain FBI clearance. But this was in 1960, the American couple. I wasn't around back during this time period, but I read books. I see documentaries. But yet there is a big story behind that picture there that nobody else sees. Maybe nobody else has seen ever since then. The point here is that we see God, rather we see man a certain way, but yet God and Jesus sees them as how they really are. Maybe that homeless person, maybe that person on the bench, maybe they have a heart of gold. Maybe something horrible just happened in their life to where they couldn't help their circumstances. Or maybe they just made a couple of bad choices. Maybe those other successful people that are nicely dressed, that are prominent members of society, maybe they're really jerks in real life. Maybe they could care less about anybody else. I'm not saying that about the people in the pictures. I'm just saying that appearances can be deceiving. And do we base our judgment, do we base our actions off of those appearances? Or do we try to get into the inner beauty like God does, like Jesus does? How do we perceive mankind? I told this story before, but you guys know me. If I got a story that relates, I'm going to tell it. There is a congregation, I heard a story many years ago of a congregation where a young man who's a teenager brought a friend of his to church. And this young lady who is visiting had never been to church before, had never studied the Bible, had never been exposed to it. And her best friend talked her into coming to services, and her best friend was a guy, and he was excited that she was there, that she was finally getting exposed. And as they walked out past the gentleman, and he shook their hands, and he said, I don't know the exact quote here, but basically that her dress was too short. It's good to have you here. Next time you need to wear something a little more modest. Do you think that she ever came back to that congregation? Her best friend that brought her, he left as well. Maybe her dress was too revealing. But where is she today? I was talking to a couple of my cousins yesterday, and again, we kind of prompted this. We had a discussion about this very thing. I heard some stories from them and some other things about that very thing. You know, appearances are more than just the inner beauty. Appearances can also be for congregations. It can be for, as Christians, how are we living our lives, and how are we judging others? How are we treating others? I know a story where there was a young lady where she went to a denominational congregation, but yet she was in an institution that was more scripturally based. And instead of taking her and trying to mold and trying to show in the right way, they basically said, going to denominational church, you're going to go to hell. As a matter of fact, that little girl's dad had died a few months earlier. And that was the response. What do you think happened to that girl? What kind of impact do you think that had on her? I know for one thing, that little girl's best friend left and went somewhere else. You see, we have to be careful in regards to how we perceive people and how we treat people. Not just in regards to the pictures here, but the people that we see in our everyday lives. Basically, we have to go by the old phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. In Hebrews chapter 13, it says, let the brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels. This is one of the most fascinating passages of the entire Bible for me. Thinking, how often have I seen somebody like that, and how often has that been a test to me in regards to my reaction, in regards to my compassion? How often has that been a test for me as a Christian in regards to how I treat that person or that situation? We never know exactly what we encounter. And again, all we see is the outward appearances. But what God sees is what's really there. In Psalm 139:16, it says, your eyes have seen my unformed substance. And in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. We see in Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, watching the evil and the good. You see, God's eyes are everywhere. He's watching everything that we do, everything that everyone else does. Again, God sees the things that we can't possibly see. I look at this congregation, and there's not a whole lot of us here. We all know each other pretty well. I've been here 5 years, but yet I feel like I know you guys pretty well. I don't know everything about you. You don't know everything about me. We have no idea about maybe some of the struggles that we go through that we don't tell others. Or maybe some of the other things in our lives that we don't expose or tell. You see, there are some things that we know and some things we don't know, but God knows it all. And we have to make sure that we're always trying to put ourselves in God's shoes. Now, not putting our nose where it doesn't belong, but trying to get an understanding about what others go through. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 39, it says, then here in heaven at your dwelling place, and forgive and act and render to each according to all his ways, whose heart you know, for you alone know the hearts of all the sons of men. 1 Chronicles 28:9, Mike read this earlier, says, as for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts if you seek him. He will let you find him, but if you forsake him, he will reject you forever. It says, know the God of your father and serve him with whole heart, for the Lord searches all hearts and knows the intents of all minds. Again, going back to that first passage that we read, we see man and mankind in a certain way. God sees it very differently. God knows every single aspect. So we see two different things here this morning, really, in this lesson in regards to how we see and perceive and treat others, but then also as myself, God knows every single thing that I do. God sees everything, even when others don't. So I've got to be careful as to how I live my life, because God's going to see it all. Just as I have to be careful at how I treat others and making sure that I treat them as Jesus would, I have to understand that God sees me the exact same way. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions here. How does God see you? What does God see in you right now? Does he see something like arrogance? Does he see bitterness, anger, gossip, hatred or cruelty, jealousy, bad language, hypocrisy? What does God see in you right now? And maybe these things don't have to be there at all times. Maybe it's just from time to time. Again, I tell that story of someone who, you got a visitor who's never been to church before, and what do? You make a comment that's pretty bad, and it runs them off forever. Is that what God sees in me? And how I take an opportunity to bring somebody to God, and yet I waste it because of my judgment, because of my arrogance, or my cruelty? Or does God see something else? Does he see empathy for others? Does he see compassion, love, kindness, patience, a cheerful heart, forgiveness, and just flat out Christian values? Basically, let's compare and contrast here. Which one of these two screens identifies Jesus? Jesus, the Son of God, the Lord and Savior, the one that every knee will bow down to, who had the power to do whatever he wanted to or needed to while on this earth. To call down those angels as he was hanging on the cross to destroy everybody in his presence. Which one of these describes Jesus? Of course, that would be this screen right here. Jesus taught the truth. Jesus didn't shy away from that. But yet he also did so in a way to where he tried to bring others instead of push them away. Now, we can preach as kind as compassion we want to, and sometimes people are still going to reject it. I've had it happen to me personally. I told you that for about a 2-year period, I had a friend of mine where I really worked. He lives in another state, so it was all through email and text messages and social media. But I worked for a long time, and I tried my best to be kind and patient. As I saw a little bit of progress, and finally one night I kind of saw his intentions. And I had to deal with it in the way that I thought was best. It got frustrating at times. It got frustrating at that moment. But I had to be careful that I didn't do something to push him away. Finally got to the point where I did everything I could. And I said, you're looking for an answer that I can't give you. You're looking for something that if I tell you, it's going to be the wrong thing to tell you. And I can't do that. In the meantime, I tried every way that I could to try to show him the truth in a way that I thought might get to him. Until finally I saw that it wasn't going to happen. What does God see in us? What kind of description impacts our daily lives? Are we the ones that push others away, or are we the ones that help to bring others to Christ? Are we the ones that have an inner soul that is beautiful, that tries to emulate Christ? Or is it one that really is the opposite way? Satan works in mysterious ways just like God does. Satan tries to get us at our weakest, when we are the most proud, when we least expect it. Is that what impacts our lives? 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 says, do not let your adornment be merely outward. Rather, let it be hidden, the hidden person of your hearts. With the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. You see, it doesn't matter the outward appearance. It doesn't matter what I look like. What matters is what is in here. What matters is how I live my life, whether I'm living as a Christian. Now, it doesn't matter what I wear in regards to being immodest, but it doesn't matter if I'm wearing a $3,000 suit or a $20 suit, or if I'm even wearing a suit. If I'm being sincere and genuine, and if I'm worshiping God, again, what matters is what's in our heart and our spirits. Romans chapter 5, verse 6 says, for when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You see, there's a reminder here that none of us are worthy of getting to heaven. That none of us have the kind of life that is deserving of being in heaven. And it will never be. No matter how faithful we are, we make mistakes. No matter how faithful we are, we still sin from time to time. No matter how faithful we are just not good enough. And yet Jesus died for us. Jesus who had no sin. Jesus who had no mistakes. Jesus who is an innocent man by all accounts. Went through one of the most torturous deaths any human being could go through. And he did it for us. He did it for me, who was raised in the church. Grandfather was an elder. At one point in my time, I left God. I left it behind. And I didn't leave it completely behind. I knew what I should have been doing. And sometimes my heart and intentions were in the right place. I was just doing the wrong things. But regardless, I was away from God. I was a lost soul. If I died at that moment, I know where I would go to. Jesus died for me to have a second chance. Jesus died so that the kind of person I was, doing the kind of things that I was doing, could have a second chance. I never forgotten that. And I try to let that drive me every single day. When I teach others who are going down the same path, I try to let that inspire me to where I know where they're coming from and I know how it needs to be treated. Sometimes I don't do the best job of doing that. But we've got to make sure that we understand that none of us are worthy. None of us are deserving. So rather, we've got to make sure that we let the beauty of Jesus be seen in us. We sing a song about this. Let the beauty of Jesus be seen in you. Is that how we're living my life? Is that how I'm living my life? Am I living in a way to where God sees beauty in my heart? Or am I living in a way to where maybe it doesn't look so good? I want to go back to that first comparison. Which one does God see in us? Does he see sin as the way mankind sees it? One of my favorite movies, there was a scene in the movie to where it's a guy and a girl that talk about sand, and one of them says, oh, I love the beach, I love the sand. And the guy says, I can't stand sand. It gets everywhere. It's impossible to get out of your shoes, your clothes. I can't stand it. And maybe that's you. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sand is sand. Sometimes it gets in places that we don't want to. But is that how we see others? In that sometimes it's a more of a burden than anything? Sometimes it's just aggravating? Or do we see people, do we see life like God sees it? Again, are we looking at the inner beauty? And this is, for me, first and foremost. How am I living my life? How am I judging others? How am I treating others? Am I putting myself in God's shoes? I'm going to read this again. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "For the Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." I heard a comparison one point in time. I don't know if it's a true story, but you got two people who come in the doors at the same time. One is wearing a nice outfit, again, clean shaven, looks like maybe a prominent member of society. Somebody else comes in with just raggedy clothes. If those two people came in at the same time, what would be your reaction? What would be my reaction? Who am I going up to first? Am I treating one differently than the other? Am I more outreach to the person who's dressed nicely? And am I barely talking to the one dressed in rags who doesn't talk to it at all? It's not just within the doors of this building. How am I doing that in regular life? How am I doing that with the people I face on a regular basis? I had a student in my class this past year who, if I had them probably 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been a very tough semester for both of us. They have autism to the point to where he's very smart, very bright kid, but very high anxiety. Interrupts a lot. Can't tell you how many days I've been doing my lesson, he just interrupts. I try to say, "You gotta be quiet." Maybe a couple of times I said, "You gotta be quiet right now." I would have treated the situation very differently 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But because I see a lot of that in my own home with my own daughter, I was able to really understand kind of where he's coming from. Made my job a whole lot easier, made his life a whole lot easier in my classroom. And it really made me think and evaluate. At one point in time, I'd have been hard on this kid. I just said, "You just got to be quiet, right? You got to shut your mouth right now." That's it. You don't want to take the test, you got to take the test right now anyway. See, understanding where people come from is a very important part of being a human being, being a Christian. And again, we can't see everything, we can't know everything, we can't understand everything. We got to at least try. And again, there are times where I fall short of that, felt way short. There are times where I look too much at the outward and not enough at the inward. I got to make sure I do a better job of that. But as Christians, it's our responsibility to be like Jesus, that no matter what, no matter who, no matter where, everybody has a chance. And that's exactly why Jesus died on that cross. As we go through the New Testament, we looked at it wasn't just for the Jews, it was for the Gentiles, it was for everybody. None of us are deserving, but yet everyone deserves a chance. Is that how we're living our lives? I said before that Christianity is not some kind of secret club. It's meant to be exposed to everybody. Everybody. I heard of a story yesterday of an organization that, again, they have an opportunity to influence people and to preach and to teach the gospel and to really dive into the depths of the Bible to people that normally may not be exposed to it. But yet they take in and waste those opportunities at certain times. And that there are even times to where maybe they would do something over here in regards to worshiping God or having a devotion, and yet they want to include these people. Because these people over here don't do things the same way they do. These people over here don't believe the same thing that they do. Or maybe they go to a different congregation than they do. And so instead of taking the opportunity to say, "You know what, we're going to have a devotion or we're going to have worship, we're going to do this, and here's how we're going to do it, feel free to join us," they don't even offer out the invitation. And what a waste that is. What a shame that is. What garbage that is. That you say, "You don't believe the same thing I do, so therefore we're going to shut you up completely." Is that what Jesus would have done? Yes, that's obviously no, because that's not what Jesus did. Jesus died on that cross a brutal, brutal death for everyone. And even around us in our own community, in our own city, our own town, we got to make sure that we understand that and we spread that. So that we understand that I don't deserve to go to heaven, but God gave me a chance. I don't deserve to be here, but yet God gave me that chance. Jesus died for that opportunity. And I got to make sure that I never forget that. So when I live my life, I got to make sure that what's on the inside of me, how I live my life, I live as a faithful Christian so that this is what God sees in me. This is what Jesus sees in me. That when it comes time for the judgment, what am I going to be judged off of? Every single one of us is going to go through the judgment. How is God going to see us? How is Jesus going to judge us? Is it going to be this one or is it going to be this one? What do they see in us? What are they seeing in me? And if they don't see this right here, it means I need to change something in my life. It means I need to reevaluate my purpose here. And again, there have been times where I haven't been there right there. There have been times where I've wasted those opportunities. One of my greatest fears as a Christian is that I do something that pushes somebody away from God. And I don't mean that in something scriptural where I say, hey, the Bible clearly says you got to be baptized to be saved. Well, I don't believe that. Well, that's what it says. It's hard to ignore that. I do it as kind of compassionate as I can, and they just don't agree with it. So therefore, they just go their own way. That's one thing. But something to say, you know what? You're going to go to hell if you don't do this. And I know what the Bible says about certain situations. I don't have the authority to make a judgment on anybody's life or soul. Nobody here on this earth has the authority to say or do that. Rather, we have to say, well, the Bible says you got to do this, otherwise, here are the consequences. Because the last thing I want to do is push somebody away because I treat the situation that way. Because I'm more judgmental than I am compassionate. Because I don't want to get into an uncomfortable situation, and so I just go along with it. I've got to make sure that I see man and man's heart as God does. And I give them the same chance and choice and opportunity that God has given me. So as we end the lesson this morning, as always, do a little bit of reflection. How does God see us right now? How does Jesus see us right now? And if we're not confident in that God is seeing something beautiful in our hearts and our souls, then this is the time to make sure that we change that. If it's something of a public nature, maybe someone here this morning is not a Christian. Maybe someone here this morning has not been the kind of faithful Christian that you need to. Again, I've been guilty of a lot of things in my life. I've been guilty of a lot of things against God, of not acting like I should, and not doing the things I need to make sure that starting right now and every day I live my life, that I do better and better and better and better. And this is a reflection as to how I should be versus maybe how I am. So this morning, if there's anyone that we need to help, if you need to get prayers to get through a certain situation, if you need to get forgiveness of sins, maybe come back to God. Please take this opportunity to do that because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. Please come as you stand and as you sing.
Just as I am.